Thanks for viewing this update on the ongoing work for the Essex Minerals Local Plan Review. I'm Richard Greaves, the Chief Planning Officer for Essex. So today's agenda, I'll start with why are minerals important, then I'll go on to what we plan for in Essex. I'll talk a little bit about the Essex Minerals Local Plan Review, some scenarios and forecasting, and then around the call for sites. There is a separate presentation online that's been carried out by Ian Blake, a partner at BPP, the company that's been employed by Essex County Council to do the site selection exercise. I'll then move on to a final slide around the next steps and proposed engagement. So why are minerals important? Minerals underpin our entire way of life and support our plan-led growth agenda in being able to create beautiful places for people. Minerals provide the construction materials we need to build the new homes, our places of work, our transport infrastructure, and essential services such as health, education, and even recreational facilities. Minerals and aggregates are essential to energy generation, agriculture, manufacturing, and many other businesses. And I'd encourage viewers to use the link that's on our webpage and view a video that's been prepared by the Mineral Products Association, the main trade body for the minerals industry. And that sets out the importance and value of minerals nationally. Minerals planning, through preparing planning policy and determining planning applications, is a statutory function of the County Council, and we are in our own right known as a minerals planning authority. In Essex, given the relatively new geology, the main mineral extracted is sand and gravel, although we do have other minerals, but only in small quantities. Once processed, sand and gravel is transformed into what we call aggregates, which is used predominantly to manufacture concrete in Essex, although we do have sites that produce sand for mortar use, and that's used as a building sand. We also have pockets of chalk, brick clay, brick earth and silica sand, but the main deposit is sand and gravel, and that is largely the subject of today's briefing. The biggest difference with minerals planning, as opposed to planning for other development, is that minerals can only be extracted where they are found. The Essex geology is dominated by sand and gravel, but mainly runs from North Essex, from the northeast to the southwest, and this dictates where we have the most active and restored sites in the county. The deposit is known as the Kesgrave deposit, and it covers mainly Braintree, Chelmsford, Colchester and Tendring, and those areas do have the most sites. Also, the difference with minerals planning is that we don't just only plan for Essex's demand, but we also plan for other areas of the country that don't have the sand and gravel deposits that we have, and I'd say London especially. Essex actually imports other minerals and aggregates from other parts of the country, such as crushed rock. The minerals plan that you can see here, the existing minerals plan, was adopted in 2014 and forms part of the development plan for Essex, sitting alongside the waste local plan and other district, city and borough local plans. It sets the policies against which minerals applications are determined. It's a controversial document, and it took us 9 years to get this plan adopted. Ultimately, it identified 14 new sites, and most of those sites have now come forward, gaining planning permission and being worked. So the plan itself has been relatively successful. But it is increasingly becoming out of date, so we had to commence a review. First of all, we've prepared a detailed assessment of the effectiveness of the plan in 2019. We've carried out numerous of what you call duty to cooperate, especially with our local planning authority partners from 2020 to 2022. We consulted on proposed updates and changes in 2022 and received over 60 responses, with many from industry challenging our approach, especially at that time that no new sites are needed. Since then, we took on board all the comments received, and the recommendation is now that we do need additional sites to have what you call a steady and adequate supply of aggregates in Essex to 2040 and beyond. We conducted 2 calls for sites in March and November 2022. And since then, consultants have been appointed to carry out an independent but detailed site assessment exercise alongside officers from Essex County Council's Place Services team. Historically, there has been a top-down approach for minerals planning that has dictated the volume, or rather the tonnage, of aggregates that a region had to plan for. And that figure was then subdivided amongst the counties and unitary authorities, and that was known as the apportionment figure. For Essex, that figure was 4.31 million tonnes per annum. In 2012, however, when the National Planning Policy Framework was introduced, a more localised methodology was brought in where mineral planning authorities could look at averaging their last 10-year sales figures and alongside any other local information could determine what annual tonnage they should plan for. However, the national and regional guidelines for aggregate provision expired in 2020, meaning that now we have no top-down figure to dictate what we should be planning for. This is a key slide that sets out what the average of the last 10-year sales has been for aggregates in Essex. We survey the industry in Essex every year to obtain this sales information. And as you can see here by the red line, the sales are indicated year on year from 2013 to 2022. You can see the minerals local plan apportionment figure, the 4.31 million tonnes per annum figure, indicated by the green, yellow line at the top of the graph. This was the figure used to previously plan the sites allocated in the existing minerals local plan. But as you can see, after monitoring sales through that 10-year period, the 4.31 million tonnes per annum figure was never reached in actual sales. So it could be reasonably argued that the now obsolete top-down figure required us to plan for too much aggregate in Essex. So we tried to look at what might be a more reasonable scenario to forecast against. 2014, as you can see, saw unusually high sales, and the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 saw a decrease in sales. But to ensure that in the future we have available a steady and adequate supply of aggregates, we now consider it would be appropriate to plan for an average of the last 10-year sales plus approximately 20% increase, which is the pink line, the pink dashed line, and currently represents around 3.98 million tonnes per annum, although that figure may change with the further work being done. If we use that figure, that 3.98 million tonnes per annum figure, what would that look like if we didn't have any new sites coming forward during the plan period, which is now to 2040 plus 7 years beyond, to ensure a sufficient aggregate land bank is in place at the end of the plan period? This slide sets that out in years. In national planning guidance, we must seek to maintain a sand and gravel land bank of at least 7 years. And we can now work out what that figure is by using sales figures subtracted from the permitted reserves in Essex. If no new sites came forward, the best case scenario is that we would have a negative of 13.4 years by 2047. You can see that figure in the bottom right of that table, meaning that if we didn't allocate new sites in the plan, then we would need to deal with speculative minerals planning applications that would stand a much increased chance of being allowed on appeal, perhaps in inappropriate locations and without having been scrutinised as part of a plan making process, something that we want to avoid. So to conclude on this point, the review of the plan is signalling we need a reduced annual tonnage, but we need a 7-year land bank in place. And we're not able to demonstrate that without new sites coming forward. So to ensure we have an up-to-date plan-led system, we need those new sites to ensure a steady and adequate supply of aggregates in Essex to 2040 and the 7 years beyond. So that takes us to the call for sites that we carried out, with the last being September to November in 2022. And that has led to a total of 52 sites being submitted by landowners or site promoters to be considered by us for inclusion in a future plan. Now, a separate presentation is available on the same web page as this presentation, and that explains how the site assessment work has been carried out by our consultants. And I would recommend that you view that presentation because it does list the sites that have come forward, but explains the methodology used to assess those sites and the indicative RAG score, that's a red, amber, green score, that's been given to that site at this point in time prior to further consultation. This is the final slide to set out what our proposed next steps are. I'm recording this at the beginning of November 2023, and we propose to consult on the next stage of the plan early in 2024. So at this point in time, what we are doing is we're briefing our own local members, the county councillors, on bringing them up to date on the review of the plan. We're also speaking to our partners and neighbours, including local planning authorities and adjoining mineral planning authorities, on the review and what our proposals actually are. We also propose to do a parish council briefing session in advance of the consultation to those parishes that will have sites in their areas and will be affected by a new site possibly coming forward in the future. The actual consultation itself will be dictated by both our adopted statement of community involvement and planning legislation, but we will be writing to properties within 250 metres of a proposed site so that local communities will be able to respond to the consultation once that's out, and in itself the consultation will last for 6 weeks as is set out in our statement of community involvement. What is extremely important at this stage is that we are not saying what sites we want to be allocated in the plan. We're allowing all consultees and local communities to comment on the proposed policies as well as the methodology used and the results so far of the site assessment exercise. We'll then take account of all the comments received and refine the plan before allocating preferred sites that we propose in a further iteration of the plan as we move forward. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. Further information is available on Essex County Council's website, searching for the Minerals Local Plan pages. Thank you.